Once again, Dwain showing that he might be this year's fantasy MVP.
He's going to be a must start. If the guy's going to be active, you got to play him.
Never want to hear that Achilles word thrown out there. And when you combine it with the midweek edition, not great, man.
But it's still really hard to move him down too low due to the matchup and how well he's been doing as a target earner.
Hillgate, Dwain, storyline going on. Hello and welcome to the Fantasy Life Show. Happy Friday, everybody. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz. It is a great day to be great, and it's a great day to break down some Thursday night football action, as well as all of the fantasy relevant injuries you need to know ahead of week 11, and even some bold predictions at the end. But I am not alone. Joining me is the one, the only Fantasy Life Director of Analytics, Dwain "The Rock" McFarland. Dwain, happy Friday.
Happy Friday, Hartitz. You know what? I think today we're going to have some real positive. We always have positive vibes going on a Good Friday, but man, it's not as scary, the injury report, as it's been over the last few weeks. So knock on wood for sure. It's still Friday. Some weird stuff could happen. So yeah, I'm kind of hyped. We're getting Nico Collins back off the top. We think it sounds like we're getting Nico Collins back. Last week was a little bit of a false alarm on that one. So yeah, good. Heading into week 11, feeling great about it.
I was pleasantly surprised going through all the injury reports yesterday. But that said, Dwain, we get done with the show. I like to kind of step away from the computer as much as possible for a good 24 hours or so. So there's always a couple of situations that I hear, on Saturday. I'm like, wait, that guy's injured. And I panic check. I'm like, why do we not talk about him on the show? And sure enough, it happened midday Friday. So fingers crossed, none of that madness going on. But if it does, reminder, some good accounts out there. Underdog NFL, I think it does a really good job just generally telling you the important injuries you need to know. So keep an eye on that. But again, we'll get to everything we know as we record this here on Friday morning. But first, Dwain, let's break down what was a pretty, fun late edition of Thursday Night Football. Wasn't the hottest to start, but at the end of the day, Eagles took down the Commanders 26-18, covering as 4-point faves. The under did cash at 49.5. So not exactly a Bengals-Ravens matchup. This game was actually only 10-6 in favor of the Commanders going to the fourth quarter. Eagles end up pulling away, though. Jaylen Hartitz just 221 yards passing, did chip in that tush-push touchdown as he's known to do. Now has 11 rushing scores on the season and trails only Derrick Henry. But the real star, Dwain, was none other than Saquon Barkley, who was having a good night, but actually hadn't found the end zone until 5 minutes left in the fourth, and then he went ahead and did so again. So I'm sure there are some poor fantasy managers went to bed thinking they got off okay. No, you did not, because 146 yards on the ground and 2 scores, also chipped in 52 yards receiving. And once again, Dwain showing that he might be this year's fantasy MVP.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, looking at Barkley, I would say, hey, how about we get him some more of these power kind of toss plays, or where you get the ball to him and let him get that momentum going. Wasn't looking very good on the inside zone type stuff early in the game. Commanders were doing a pretty good job actually of bottling all of that up. And then late in the game, it could also be a little bit of, the other defense kind of getting tired, and you got this big, strong, fast guy coming at you, suddenly takes away the angles. He was pretty much untouched on those plays, scoring 2 long rushing touchdowns. But yeah, man, Saquon just continues to come through and looks absolutely amazing. I mean, it really does look like, Ian, he's playing with a chip on his shoulder. What's interesting about this Eagles offense, they've always been more of a run-heavy offense, even over the last 3 years. But, man, they are really leaning into the run game this year. And it's mostly been all about Jalen Hurts scoring touchdowns via tush-push, and then having Saquon Barkley, score, from longer out, not getting the carries inside the 5. We saw that happen to him again last night. You thought he was going to get it. Nope, down at the 1, the tush-push is coming, and you can't really blame the Eagles on that front. It's such an automatic touchdown. But earlier in the game, on a short yardage play, they did fake the tush push and toss it out. I like that concept. You get one block, and that is something that you could get a house call on Saquon. So other defenses, they'll have to kind of remember that one now. They'll have to kind of keep that in the back of their mind. Okay, they could actually be tossing this outside to Saquon. But, man, it is hurting a little bit. Like A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, it's tough if you're going to be able to run for this many yards like what we're seeing for the Eagles. There's just not a lot left to go around, and if you're having to try to divide that up 2 and 3 ways, Dallas Goedert got a little involved last week. We're just not seeing the massive boom games from A.J. Brown that we saw last year, because they're not having to lean into their pass game. A.J. Brown's still an absolute stud, but these game scripts are putting him in a situation where they just don't have to pepper him with all these targets.
Yeah, man, I just looked this up right now. A.J. Brown, 0 targets inside the 10-yard line this year, just 3 from inside the 20, 0 touchdowns overall, and Devontae Smith only 1 inside the 10-yard line. So, look, Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, obviously Hall of Fame quarterbacks, but we've seen it, Dwayne. They love getting to the 1-yard line and peppering off that slant, trying to, pad those stats a little bit. Don't exactly get that in the Eagles offense. But AJB still did find his way up to 65 yards on 8 targets. First full game this year, under 84 yards, but didn't quite kill you. Devonta Smith, though, good job by you, Dwayne. You did call him a downgrade back on Tuesday in our utilization episode. He finished with just 29 yards, second straight game under 30. So Dallas Goedert did chip in 61 yards on 5 targets, caught all 5 of those. So pretty good game there. But just goes to show you, in this very run-heavy Eagles offense, similar to San Fran, tough for all their stars involved to go off during any single week. Then to the Commanders, Dwayne, we do have a situation where Jayden Daniels hasn't exactly looked the same since, suffering that rib injury a few short weeks ago, particularly on the ground. Before the rib injury, Dwayne, he was averaging 8.7 fantasy points per game just from rushing, after just 2.8. So we were talking before the show. You mentioned how you can just kind of tell when he's throwing. It seems like he is, trying to protect himself a little bit more, and all the credit to him for playing through the pain. But have you seen enough, Dwayne, ahead of next week's smash spot against the Cowboys to downgrade him at all, or are you just hopeful that he will be healthier by then?
I think we do have to downgrade him. Like, he's not going to fall out of the top 12. You got a great matchup and everything. He's kind of like the Brian Thomas Jr. version of quarterbacks, right? We know these guys are playing through some injuries. Actually, uniquely, they're both playing through like chest type injuries, and so it's impacting playing. Now they're practicing. So they're not on the injury report technically by the time we get to the end of the week. We'll see what happens with BTJ. So, they're not like automatic benches, but I do think we have to downgrade them because Jayden Daniels, man, if we don't have the rushing, right, it's going to be a problem. Like last night, watching him, like even once he started to take off, you could tell he was having to be very conservative. Like he was getting down pretty quickly. He had 13% of the design rush attempts last night, so it was still fine. 10% of the scrambles. He's just not being as productive. And part of that goes to the Eagles. The Eagles defense played really well last night. But if we don't have that upside on the ground game, we know with Jayden Daniels, it's not that the Commanders really want to throw the ball all the time in. They're trying to be more of a balanced offense. We're not getting 300-yard passing games right now out of Jayden Daniels. And that's the biggest thing I noticed, honestly, was in the passing game. He's falling away from the throws, probably trying to protect himself from getting hit, and he was short-arming a lot of those throws. Like he had, actually, I can't remember if it was Terry McLaurin, Noah Brown, whoever early in the game. I think it was Noah Brown on a crossing route who had beat his guy. You hit that in stride, like that might be another 15 to 20 yards. If you're Troy Aikman and you're calling a game, you're going to say that that's a touchdown. But probably at least another 15 to 20 yards. So looking at, Jayden Daniels, the biggest thing I'm seeing, is he's just not wanting to hang in there quite as much in the pocket. And look, I get it. Like 300-pounders trying to fall on you when your chest is injured. I would probably be doing the same thing, but I do think that is majorly impacting the passing game. So he's kind of like a guy right now. You're thinking 200 passing yards per game. So he has to get it done on the ground, and that's not happening.
Just 191 last night. Eagles defense has been lights out ever since returning from their bye, so that certainly did play a factor. But then again, Cowboys, when they do have a healthy Micah Parsons, certainly a different beast. And then the Titans after that before their Week 14 bye. So look, you're still going to be starting Daniels, but yeah, some of those Lamar-esque blowups might be, tough to get to, at least in the near future. Otherwise, Brian Robinson did return from his injury to, pretty much his normal role. 16 carries, 63 yards, and a touchdown on the ground. But the real star, at least in full PPR scoring, Dwayne, wound up being Austin Eckler. Basically led the team in receiving, 89 yards and 8 catches out there. A game where Terry McLaurin had just 1 catch for 10 scoreless yards, which should be illegal. My man didn't have a target in the first half, man. Can we not at least get that just token? Our wide receiver one doesn't have the ball. Let's throw him a screen that's probably going to get blown up sort of play. No, we could not. It was the Austin Eckler show. So what did we see out of the utilization in this backfield, Dwayne, with B-Rob back?
Well, I do think that Kingsbury came into the game thinking, okay, like, how do we get Eckler onto the field more? We're probably going to have to drop the ball down underneath because we're trying to protect Jayden Daniels. We also know that Vic Fangio is going to play a lot of the shell type coverage, try not to give us the big plays. So I think it was a game plan thing. And historically, I will say this, we do not see 2 running backs in the backfield really work together. But he did a nice job of making that work, doing some interesting things with misdirection with both players. The problem is, like, when you get 2 running backs out there, you can't do it all the time, Ian, because really, what kind of mismatch are you creating? Neither one of them are good blockers, so it's not necessarily you're losing a player if you're trying to run the ball. So like, okay, great. You want to hand off to Brian Robinson, and then Austin Eckler, what's he going to do? He's not blocking a linebacker, so he's not really helping you. But in the passing game is where it really did work, and that worked to the advantage of Austin Eckler, who they were sneaking out, getting him some open looks in the flats. He had a 28% target share last night, so he was the leader on the team. I don't think that's the way you want to design your offense, though, going forward. I think it's a nice wrinkle, but I think it's something that we'll just have to kind of keep an eye on. I don't think I remember a game, Ian, maybe you do, where I've seen two running backs on the field together that often. We'll see if that kind of trend sticks. But I do think the bigger takeaway is Brian Robinson Jr. did look healthy, 54% of the snaps, 67% of the team's rushing attempts. So that was pretty much, like you said, back to that early season role where we saw him like have weeks where he's really like that borderline running back 1, more of a mid-range running back 2 in our ranks. So I think we can feel more comfortable about him.
I think the last time I can somewhat remember that, Dwayne, would have been the Melvin Gordon, Austin Eckler Chargers, which guess who they were coached by? Anthony Lynn, who happens to be the running back coach in Washington. So could be that there. If there was a team that could pull it off, and just based on kind of their wide receiver room, I do think Washington makes sense. But let's face it, even as great as a receiver as Austin Eckler is, when you compare him to even an average wide receiver, probably still taking the, more pure pass catcher there. So again, mentioned the disappointing game from Terry McLaurin. Don't freak out, guys. This snapped an 8 straight game, streak of 13 plus PPR points on the season. Still, only Justin Jefferson has more games with 15 plus PPR points than the artist known as Scary Terry. So yeah, it sucked, but I would expect bigger things, hopefully as soon as next week. Otherwise, shout out Zach Ertz. The 1 week Dwayne doesn't have him as a sicko start, goes off 47 yards and a touchdown on 6 catches, a lot of which came on, kind of this garbage time mop up, drive at the end of the game, but also got a 2-pointer, man. Love seeing an
that was a great
revenge
play.
Game. It was a great play.
That was a great play on the 2-point conversion. If you guys didn't see it, it's definitely, I know most 2-point conversions aren't worth going back and watching, but this one is. This is a great job by Ertz. Basically, at a 45-degree angle, leaning out of the end zone, catches the ball and manages to get both toes down inside the white stripe. That's very impressive for a 34-year-old kind of stiff tight end that never earned a yard of yak.
And most importantly, Dwayne, guess what? The Zach Ertz Yak Twitter account is back, baby, letting you guys know that, yes, Ertz, in fact, did not break a tackle on that catch. So that's going to wrap up Thursday Night Football, guys. Now we're getting to plenty of fantasy-relevant injuries. But first, a quick word to our friends over in New Era. Get my Eagles hat on. Go Birds. Fly, Eagles, fly. Silver Linings Playbook was an okay movie. Okay, what's up, Fantasy Life fans? Show your support for those who serve with the official cap of Salute to Service from New Era Cap. With a snow camo crown and graphite accented team logos, the Salute to Service collection lets you proudly show your appreciation in a sleek and sophisticated way. Pay tribute to those who protect us with the official cap of the NFL from New Era Cap today. The NFL and New Era are dedicated to honoring our nation's heroes through contributions to the NFL Salute to Service charity partners. Learn more at NFL.com/salute. Quarterbacks, Dwayne. Let's get freaking after it. Starting off with, yes, T-Law is once again going to be sidelined for the Jaguars, which means another week of the Mac Jones experience. Now, the good news is with Lawrence, I thought we were looking at a season-ending left shoulder injury, but there is optimism he could return after the team's Week 12 bye. So as things stand right now, going up against the Lions defense that really hasn't missed much of a beat, even in the absence of Aiden Hutchinson, how are you approaching the rest of these pass catchers in Jacksonville? Because I think we all know we're not starting Mac Jones.
Yeah, Mac Jones obviously last week came out late, a complete dud. Couldn't even get to 125 passing yards, so not necessarily ideal. Although I don't want to freak out about it. We have seen Mac Jones, put up 300-yard passing games before as a Patriot. So I don't feel like there's a huge difference fantasy-wise between him and Trevor Lawrence. Obviously, Trevor Lawrence is the better quarterback of the two NFL-wise. But I think you're looking at two guys, Ian, that essentially they're going to throw for 150 yards or they're going to go for 300 yards. Like, I don't know which one that's going to be, but I think that's still in the range of outcomes for Mac Jones. I think a lot of this really, honestly, comes down to the health of the wide receiver, Brian Thomas Jr., who's been playing through the chest injury. So he's the main guy that I'm thinking about in the ranks, like what's too high, what's too low. I know we'll talk more about wide receivers a little bit later, but I'm not moving Evan Ingram. You've talked about this before. One of the positions that can kind of be insulated from these quarterback changes, if you will, are the lower ADOT, lower average depth of target. And all that means, guys, is how far you're getting, you are whenever the quarterback throws you the ball. How many yards down the field? And when we talk about Evan Ingram, mostly working short area of the field, underneath, drag routes, things like that. Mac Jones should be able to get the ball to Evan Ingram, who does lead this team by a large margin in target share since Christian Kirk left the lineup. The downfield options, Ian, I think are the ones that are a little bit more tricky in this offense.
Yeah, right now, I would say the only tight ends you should probably confidently be starting ahead of Ingram, despite the quarterback downgrade: Travis Kelce, George Kittle, Brock Bowers, David Njoku, and TJ Hawkinson. It's tough to really get him too much further down the ranks, particularly with Isaiah Likely seemingly coming back for the Ravens. More on that a bit later. But yeah, man, looking at our consensus ranks over on FantasyLife.com right now, Brian Thomas Jr., not exactly his usual upside wide receiver 2 self, couldn't quite crack our top 25. I have him right there as my wide receiver 25, but could move him down to a few spots. Dwain has him wide receiver 29. None of our rankers have him lower than wide receiver 33. So again, this isn't a you can't start him situation. It only takes one, especially against a man-heavy defense like Detroit, but certainly it would be a lot cooler if T-Law was under center. Otherwise, just a few other quarterback injuries to note. Kirk Cousins started off the week with a limited session due to a right shoulder / right elbow injury. He is back to full, though, and seemingly good to go for Sunday's matchup against the Broncos. Also, Sam Darnold with a right hand injury was limited to start the week, practice in full on Thursday, and presumably is now good to go for his matchup as well. And then again, just a reminder, Dak Prescott out for the season with that hamstring injury. Cooper Rush will be QB1. However, he did pop up with a neck injury, still practicing in full, so fully expecting him to start Monday night against the Texans. But, Dwayne, not a doctor, but don't love when a quarterback is dealing with a neck injury, even if it isn't the most severe in the world. So that was our quarterback news. Now we're getting to some running back goodness right after a quick word to our friends over at Knockaround. More Eagles sunglasses. Got to support the winners out here. And these ones are nice, Dwayne. I know we're a couple of Cowboys fans here, but, I could admit a nice pair of shades when they are. And these Eagles ones are looking pretty fly. And yeah, shout out to Knockaround for providing just that. You got your more NFL collection shades on, Dwayne. Looking fantastic. I know Mrs. McFarland had to steal some of your other ones, but you know what? They're nice sunglasses, man. So who can blame her? But yeah, guys, you can check these out and much more over at knockaround.com. Polarized lenses with high quality UV 400 protection for less than $50. If you're like me, you've been to a few pool parties over the years where, yes, you want to keep your sunglasses on, but sadly you lose them by the end of the day. Guess what? I hope you don't lose your Knockaround frames, but at least if you do, it's not $150 down the drain. Less than $50 for high quality. Again, I have been wearing these things since college. I know, Dwayne, you had some pairs before they even became our sponsors. So thrilled to, again, be in partnership with, in my opinion, the best sunglasses that money can buy. So again, check out the officially licensed NFL collection and so much more over at knockaround.com. Just make sure you use code LIFE and you'll get yourself some free shipping. Running back season, Dwayne, and we say at the top of the show, again, not the world's worst injury week. Now, it's been a pretty brutal season, so relatively speaking, of course, but we'll kick things off with another look at the Jaguars. Tank Bigsby not practicing due to an ankle injury. And we've seen these running backs usually be limited and then still not play a certain point. So to see Bigsby as a DMP, really not good. So again, facing the Lions, and we're not exactly expecting a shootout here, but based on what we saw last week, man, sure seems like Travis Etienne could be looking at a workhorse role.
Yeah, and we don't know for sure what the deal is with Etienne and Bigsby if they're both healthy. But last weekend, we had Bigsby get hurt in the first quarter. He had a big run that actually got called back due to penalty, and then it was the Travis Etienne show pretty much from there. The other thing here is, even if Tank Bigsby was 100% healthy, this is not a spot where we want to be getting him into our lineups. Like, you could if you had to, but these are they're 14-point dogs to the Lions. What's the kind of game script that you need for Tank Bigsby? You want a close game or a leading game script where they can lean into the ground game. They're probably not going to be able to do that. And even if they could, Detroit is one of the toughest matchups on the ground for running backs. So this is a major week to fade Tank Bigsby. I had him as a low-end running back 3 to start the week, but now after 2 straight DNPs, even if he gets in an LP, I'm probably moving him to running back 4 territory. Ian, I really don't want him anywhere near fantasy lineups if I can help it this weekend.
Jaguars are implied to score a week low 16.5 points. So, yeah, truly close start decisions, guys. Probably go ahead and take the other person. With ETN, though, Dwayne, I'm looking at our consensus ranks right now. He's basically tied with Audric Estime, right behind Rico Dowdle, Najee Harris, Tony Pollard, those types. Right after Travis Etienne, you have Alexander Madison, which, yeah, Lord knows we're not trying to go down that route. And then a bunch of kind of RB2 types. So, do you think that's fair for ETN, that kind of higher end RB3 treatment? Or if and when we probably do get Bigsby ruled out, is he someone you could see yourself elevating, say, to DeAndre Swift territory, more low-end RB2?
I don't think I can get there. I don't trust the offense enough in this particular game script. ETN, he could come through like in the passing down role. He really took more of that last week, but we also know this is a team that just does that quirky thing where they'll suddenly decide, oh, we're gonna give Dearness Johnson the passing down role, and he got some of that last week. So it's just one of these situations where Jags aren't playing that well. The matchup's really terrible. Travis Etienne, let's be honest, hasn't been good this year. Has been battling injuries, so there's just so many things. It's hard for me to want to move him up that far. I would say more of a low end running back too, though. Like he is a guy that if you were hurting and you needed to have him in your lineup. Like he's not a guy you need to have on the bench, but he's not someone either that you're getting super excited that there's all this upside if you can get him into the lineup.
Lions have allowed the fifth fewest PPR points per game to opposing running backs. Naturally, Dan Campbell, we're going to run the ball, we're going to stop the run, and they have done both those things pretty well this season. Next, running back news. Packers RB Josh Jacobs is dealing with a bit of a quad issue, and it's just notable, Dwayne, because they are coming off a bye, and while he was banged up before, had the questionable tag going into their Week 9 matchup, that was actually with an ankle injury. So don't have any reason to believe he's necessarily going to be missing time, but that said, MarShawn Lloyd, their rookie third-round pick, actually has a chance to return. He's recovering from ankle and hamstring injuries himself. Hasn't played yet, since week 2, basically. He's been limited this week. So if we do get Marshawn Lloyd back, Dwayne, what do you think we could see from Josh Jacobs? Because, again, we're not going to be able to trust Lloyd as a standalone asset, but we have seen a bit more, I think, of Emmanuel Wilson and even Chris Brooks behind Jacobs than even I would have anticipated.
Well, I think Jacobs honestly has been pretty steady. Like, I mean, if you look at his last 4 games, last week he was a little bit low, or the week before the bye, he was a little bit lower in his snap share, but that number's bounced around just a little bit. But he's typically 60 to 65%. I still think that he's the clear-cut number 1 in the backfield. I think what happens for a guy like Lloyd, I don't know which role he takes, Ian, because Emmanuel Wilson and Chris Brooks essentially are now splitting the running back 2 duties. So he probably replaces one of those 2 guys. My guess is that it's Chris Brooks because they kind of like Emmanuel Wilson to do some things on pass downs. Chris Brooks more the guy they come in and use to spell Jacobs between the tackles, that sort of thing. So my guess that would be Lloyd's role. I do think that Josh Jacobs, is a guy that for this week, I'm not doing anything as far as worrying about Lloyd carving out this larger role. I would say Lloyd in a deeper league is someone that, is nice to stash. Like he is on most waiver wires. The problem is it's not a clear situation where if something happened to Jacobs, it would be his backfield. They've already shown they like these other 2 backs as well. So it could be a 2-way split. It could be a 3-way split. We don't know for sure. But what we do know is when Marshawn Lloyd is healthy, we do like him. Explosive playmaker. There's a lot of upside. So it's one of those things you stash it. You probably can't start it the first week if Jacobs were to miss time, but you would get to monitor it and see, okay, what do I have here? And it could be good.
Not a small guy. Got that Duke Johnson comp from Dane Brugler. So, of course, he's my favorite running back in the world. And, also has that pass-catching ability. But I'm with you, Dwayne. If Jacobs went down, I would like to think Lloyd would be the guy. But, again, wouldn't be surprised at all if it was just more of an evenly split 3-back committee with Wilson and Brooks. So, again, most people, I'm assuming, are just starting Jacobs, no doubt about it. But maybe for those gifted 10-man, 8-man league rosters out there, Dwayne, Josh Jacobs versus Chase Brown.
Oh, man. I'm going Chase Brown. I have Chase Brown ahead of Josh Jacobs right now in the ranks, I think. So I better. If not, I have to switch
roll with that. You actually have, looks like Brown 14, Jacobs 12. So same area, but maybe a little update
so they're
there.
Together.
Kareem Hunt versus Josh Jacobs.
Man, I have Kareem Hunt as a guy that I really like this week, but I've got Jacobs slightly above him.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's about right. Again, borderline RB1. I'm sure most of you are starting him regardless, but those are two such examples. Last RB note, Dwayne, we got some issues going on in Pittsburgh. Najee Harris is okay. Didn't practice on Wednesday due to that newfound ankle injury, but got in a full session on Thursday, even went out of his way to tell the media that I'm good. So yeah, he should be good. However, Jaylen Warren, midweek Thursday edition with a back injury, had a DNP. Not looking good, Dwayne. Now, if we do see Jaylen Warren sidelined for this one, first of all, that sucks. We're playing a Ravens team where, yes, you want to be at full health. And just because of how stout Baltimore is in their front seven, you would have expected this to be a game where maybe Jaylen does get more receiving usage. If he is out, though, are you exactly flying Najee Harris up the ranks? Or with a healthy Cordero Patterson, do you actually see his role even changing all that much?
I don't think his role changes that much. I think Najee's in the same role that he's been in. It's a tough matchup for Najee. The way he does most of his damage is going to be on the ground. The Ravens are a tough matchup from that perspective. Now, he has shown to be a capable receiver in the past. He's not like a big plus as a receiver out of the backfield, but he can definitely catch the ball. He has soft hands, and he can do his job in that capacity. But to your point, Cordero Patterson is healthy, and we saw back in week 4 with Jaylen Warren out, that Cordero Patterson was on his way to probably a pretty significant role that game, Ian, and he ended up getting hurt. I think it was by halftime he was hurt, and he already had 23% of the rushing attempts, was getting some work on the passing down. So I think Patterson takes more of the work that Jaylen Warren leaves behind if he misses over what we would expect Najee to pick up. Najee probably gets a little bit of a tick up, Ian, but still a tough matchup. Not enough that I'm going to be moving him up the ranks very much if we don't have Jaylen Warren, maybe like a spot.
CPAT averaging a healthy 5.6 yards per carry and was balling out that game too. So yes, I am completely biased with this, but CPAT, not someone we're going to rely on in fantasy, although I think he might be on my 32 team waivers, Dwayne. So maybe I need to make a move over there. Right now, Najee coming in. Let's see. Dwayne has him as his RB23. I'm just a little bit lower, RB27. Again, mixture of that matchup. I will move him up a few spots if we do get Jaylen Warren out, but he's still not going to be in that must start top 15 territory or anything like that. So few other notes to shout out here with the running backs. Tyler Algier, good to go with his Thursday full practice, dealing with a quad injury. Some limited guys, Christian McCaffrey, but this was the same case last week, so we were fully expecting him to have his usual full-time role. Aaron Jones as well has been limited this week with a rib issue, but he's already gone on and said he's expecting to play. Also, Titans running back Tony Pollard. Actually, this is good news. He's resting, didn't practice to start the week and then was limited, but he's actually off the injury report with that foot injury, which is a good sign there. Isaiah Pacheco has been limited, but not expecting to play. Good shout from the FantasyLife Twitter account. Please follow us if you don't already. If you're in guillotine leagues, guys, make sure you go ahead and just check out if Pacheco is out there, because again, shouldn't be too long before he actually is someone that we're getting right back into the RB1 conversation. And also Dameon Pierce limited with that groin injury, presumably though on his way back to the lineup ahead of Monday Night Football, would be the handcuff to own behind Joe Mixon. Not looking as good. J.K. Dobbins, he was a late addition on Thursday with a DNP. That said, it's a personal reason. So hopefully everything's okay with Dobbins and whatever he's going through. Not an injury, though. So hopefully, again, we'll get that Friday just back to practice and everything is good to go there. Gus Edwards is also banged up with an ankle injury. He's been limited. That said, last week, he was limited on Wednesday and Thursday, practiced in full on Friday, and then played through his questionable tag. So Gus Bus should be good to go for Sunday night, Jamal Williams not practicing with a groin injury. Dwayne, Kendre Miller, someone that I think people should consider getting in, the skank leagues, if you will, because he should be off IR soon. And again, apparently wasn't even injured. Just again, Dennis Allen's last hurrah was apparently trying to screw over his second-year running back one final time. And then, I'm sorry, Dwayne, this one's actually, I should have put this at the top. Hunter Lupke, man, not practicing with that calf injury. Do you think your dad will be okay after he hears this news?
Yeah, I think my dad will be okay. We'll see. Like Lipke has gotten the larger role, but he doesn't get the touches. So, he's still been frustrated with it, not getting much out of Zeke, but we have seen some better things out of Rico Dowdle here recently. So it is significant though, because that opens up passing down work. And so if Rico Dowdle suddenly got most of that work too, even though we're not that excited about the Cowboys, like he could be sitting in a near full-time role.
Quick, while we're on the subject, Dwayne, I didn't even plan this, but we did get a note that Mike McCarthy's on Rico Dowdle. Definitely, you have to get on the ball. That's my focus, to get him opportunities. He's the lead back. I saw a lot of people running with this, like, oh my God, McCarthy calls Rico the lead back. He's been the lead back. It's just now McCarthy's saying it. Was that your interpretation?
Yeah, I'm so tired of these accounts like, oh my God, look at these words. They mean, like, the utilization has been telling us this stuff for like multiple weeks. So it's like,
Right.
I don't know. I don't know what we're doing. But yeah, he had 50% of the carries last week, 59% the week before. So he's already been the lead guy. We'll say if Lipke's missing, that would open up the potential to be like a 70% snap share, right? So that would be significant for Rico Dowdle. That would probably get him into a lot of lineups where right now, I think I haven't looked across our rankers. We're all pretty low on Rico this week, but if Lipke's out, I do think he becomes a borderline running back too.
Rico's in that, top like 27, top 28 range where you just get to a point where, yeah, you're going to play him over these straight up backups. But yes, right now, not someone that needs to be jammed into lineups. So those were the key running back injuries. Plenty of wide receiver ones on the way. But first, a quick word to our friends over at DraftKings. A chill in the air, leaves falling to the ground, and football every weekend. That is what fall is all about, and you can make each weekend even more exciting by getting into the action with our partners at DraftKings, the #1 place to bet on touchdowns. And right now, all new customers who bet just $5 will instantly get $200 in bonus bets. All you have to do is download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and sign up using our promo code FANTASYLIFE. The crown is yours. Again, that's $200 in bonus bets instantly, and you can stay in on the action and use your $200 in bonus bets to bet anytime touchdowns on DraftKings. After all, DraftKings is the place to bet touchdowns. If sports betting is not yet available in your state, don't worry. You can still join in on all the fun with DraftKings Daily Fantasy and have the shot to win cash prizes. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. New customers use our promo code FANTASYLIFE and bet just $5 on any wager to get $200 in bonus bets instantly. That's promo code FANTASYLIFE only at DraftKings Sportsbook. All right, Dwain, he's back. Hopefully. Nico Collins practicing in a limited fashion ahead of Monday Night Football. We have heard throughout the week from some of the alleged insiders, though, that things are looking good ahead of, again, this Texas, battle for Texas matchup against the Cowboys. So expected to play, and accordingly, Dwain right back into his usual standing as wide receiver 1, both in our hearts and, more importantly, our fantasy lineups.
Yeah, and I've got Nico as the wide receiver 4 overall this weekend. So I am anticipating, him being removed from the injury report. Probably bump him down just a tad if he's not in, but he's going to be a must start. If the guy's going to be active, you got to play him. The thing is, it's the Monday night game, so we do need some sort of confirmation. Can we please get this? Because last week we got the super late breaking news on Nico, and it was a Sunday night game. So kind of a similar situation to last week, but all signs do point towards wheels up for Collins. So top 5 if he's active.
100%. So again, please don't give him that questionable tag. That will complicate things just a little bit. Guys like Xavier Hutchinson. Honestly, John Mechie would probably be our most preferred, backup. God forbid something happens to Nico. You could look at Jalen Tolbert on the Cowboys as someone else who would be available. Maybe even Dalton Schultz for that flex. So hopefully we don't have to get there. But yes, Nico back in our hearts as the wide receiver 1. Tank Dell, Dwain, someone who, again, now probably doesn't really need to be in lineups. I've been ranked as my wide receiver 29, assuming Nico is playing. You have him as wide receiver 34. So again, not a stay away or anything, reasonable enough matchup, but unfortunately haven't seen that huge year 2 for Tank like we were hoping for. Now let's talk about a potential return for one. Bengals wide receiver T. Higgins with that quad injury. He has been practicing in a limited fashion, and Dwain, we got some investigative journalism going on. Shout out Andrew Cooper. Great follow on Twitter, and shout out to our YouTube fam. Going to show you, Dwain, some really interesting stuff. The Hillgate, Dwain, storyline going on. So over the years, T. Higgins, you got this, just state of the art, Bengals facility. They walk across a public street and then get into their, practice field. And there's this hill that Higgins has, sometimes run up pretty hard and sometimes not. You can see in certain weeks when he's been not playing, he kind of walks up the hill, even at an angle, Dwain. But you do look at what he's been doing this week, and lo and behold, again, Dwain, we are not doctors, but that looks like a man ready to play football. He is running up that hill. He's not afraid of the angle. T. Higgins, you buying the hill storyline?
Probably not, but I think it's hilarious, and I love the thread. All the things we talk about with small samples and what's probably noise and not noise. I really have no way of knowing, honestly, if this is noise or not, but I know the sample's not big enough to say it's something that we could lean into. But we are hearing positive things about T. Higgins, and it does sound like he is trending in the right direction. Look, man, this guy's having a career year, Ian. He's got a 29% target share in the games that he's played. I mean, that leads the Bengals. That's playing games with Jamar Chase on the other side. So he is having an optimal year. And when you look around the Bengals, there's really not anyone else. They kind of spread it around, whenever you don't have T. Higgins, right? It's a little bit of Mike Gesicki, and Gesicki's been great in the games without T. Higgins, but it's not like he's getting a 30% target share. You got Trenton Irwin doing a little bit, Jermaine Burton when he doesn't oversleep or miss meetings or just miss entire walk-through practices on Saturday. He gets a sprinkle. So it's been kind of a by committee, replacement of him. So I think once he's ready and he's back, this offense condenses 100% around just him and Jamar Chase because they're both ballers, as well as Mr. Chase Brown out of the backfield. So I have T. Higgins right now as my wide receiver 17. So I'm assuming that he is healthy and that he is ready to go. So he's in the must start range. You're not if he's active, you're not playing around with it. You're getting him into your lineup.
And that's ahead of guys like a returning DK Metcalf, Drake London, Calvin Ridley, Jacoby Myers, amongst others. This is a Sunday night game, though, Dwayne. If we hear that Higgins is a game-time decision, he's got the questionable tag, and we don't know for sure if he is going to play, where do you kind of drop him there? I mean, I'm looking at Jamison Williams and Lab McConkey, wide receiver 29 and wide receiver 30. I mean, McConkey's interesting because he's also on Sunday night, but I feel like almost after them, that would be where I'd be almost willing to take the risk. What say you?
Yeah, he gets down in that range with Tank Dell, Brian Thomas Jr. I mean, another area like Amari Cooper, where you're also dealing with some injuries, dealing with some questions. Like that's the group I would put him in. But once you get to names like Ricky Pearsall, Keenan Allen, Rashad Bateman, Romeo Dobbs, DJ Moore, sorry Swing, like those I'm probably taking. I'm figuring out, is there a way I can take a chance on Higgins and have a backup plan, even if it's not ideal, that might give me 5 points if he misses the game.
Jermaine Burton, when he's not sleeping, did actually work his way up into a bigger role last week. So he would be the emergency guy. Mike Gesicki definitely preferred and wouldn't completely write off Gesicki even if Higgins is going to play. Again, Eric all out for the season. So presumably we'll get Gesicki more in a full-time role, even if Higgins does return. So keep an eye on that one. But yes, shout out
Gus
Andrew
Edwards.
Cooper. Great follow on Twitter.
Gus Edwards is on the opposite. Gus Edwards on the opposite team. Now he has a ankle injury of his own right now. But like if for some reason you didn't have Higgins and you could go to, and it was in the flex, that would be an option. Gus Edwards is available in a ton of leagues.
Quentin Johnston probably not rostered in an overwhelming amount either, so he would be the kind of last guy. Mentioned before, but Seahawks wide receiver DK Metcalf should be back practicing in full with that knee injury, and even got Ian Rappaport saying he is indeed expecting to play. So mentioned in the rankings, Dwayne, right there behind T. Higgins, should be in more lineups than not. How does this impact Jackson Smith and the Jigba, though? Because it is tough to see him, again, clearing 200 freaking air yards with Metcalf on the field.
Look, and Jigba's done a nice job this year of growing his target share. So he's clearly already passed the former number 2 wide receiver Tyler Lockett, right? It has been JSN as the number 2 in the offense. Actually, it's right there neck and neck with DK Metcalf as far as targets, has led at some points, has been a little behind at some points in the games where both guys have been playing. The question really for JSN is, will they continue to deal the ball to him further down the field? And even last game before the bye week, it wasn't that his ADOT went completely nuts. His average depth of route, which we can get from Pro Football Focus, was actually only like a yard higher than what it normally is. So in my opinion, a lot of that came down to, yes, Geno forced him the ball when he needed to down the field, but JSN has shown us he can do those things. So will he earn enough of Geno's confidence to keep doing those sort of things moving forward? I don't think that we can necessarily say. But when I look at this, Ian, we've got a pretty big sample now. We only have one game where JSN did this, right? All the other games, he's been this underneath kind of merchant guy. So I need another game before I'm really going to buy into the fact that JSN is suddenly going to get all these downfield targets. We moved him up in the ranks a little bit because there's a chance that Geno goes back to him in that scenario, which opens up a lot more upside for him. But yeah, I have him more as a borderline wide receiver 2. He was a borderline wide receiver 3 before. So that's the upgrade that I gave him in the utilization report 2 weeks ago, and that's the way we have it in the ranks.
Also, that one game was against the Rams, which, guess what? They've been getting flamed by wide receivers all season long. Also saw Marvin Harrison Jr. and even Juwan Jennings go absolutely nuclear against them. And again, not exactly live up to those same newfound expectations the rest of the way. So Dwayne has JSN wide receiver 24. I have him wide receiver 26. Not saying you can't get him in those lineups, but no, we are not making him this must-have option, particularly with Metcalf back. All right, Dwayne, sad news here. Falcons wide receiver Darnell Mooney, late week addition on Thursday to the injury report, limited practice with an Achilles injury. So I hope it's nothing, but you never want to hear that Achilles word thrown out there. And when you combine it with the midweek edition, not great, man. Already a tough matchup going up against the Broncos. Darnell Mooney, if we do see him going to the weekend with that questionable tag, this is going to be also in the dreaded late afternoon time slot. Probably should start looking on that waiver wire or your bench to try to find a replacement.
Yeah, I'll be moving him down. He was already a wide receiver 3 this week due to the tough matchup against the Broncos, one of the toughest matchups for wide receivers. So looking at the ranks right now, I would push him below DeAndre Hopkins, Jamison Williams, Ladd McConkey. I'm already going to just do this. I think where it starts to get questionable is like Brian Thomas Jr., who we know is dealing with his own injury. But I could see pushing him as far as below like Quentin Johnson and Tank Dell, Ian. So that would put him like borderline wide receiver 3 territory. Because you got Josh Downs, Amari Cooper, Jerry Jeudy, Jaylen Waddle. Like that's probably the range I would have him in, but I wouldn't be trying. I just don't see any reason to try to force it this weekend with Darnell Mooney, given this injury information.
Like we'll start him over DJ Moore, of course. I mean, come on, Dwain.
Probably can't even do that this weekend, to be honest. But yeah, that's about that's about the range.
I got producer Swing now actively yelling at me in my ear, which is deserved. I was out of line there, Dwain. But yes, not good for Darnell Mooney. Would open things up for Drake London, but again, he's someone that you're pretty much starting regardless already. Top 18, I believe, wide receiver. Again, only that low because of the tough matchup. Let's talk about another wide receiver injury, but more good news in this one. Bills wide receiver 1, maybe eventually. Amari Cooper dealing with that wrist injury. Still been limited in practice this week, but he did say he feels like he'll be able to play. And they need him, Dwain, because right now Keon Coleman, he has already been ruled out with his own wrist injury. If we do get Cooper back on the field ahead of this matchup against the Chiefs, how willing are you to force him in the lineups?
I'm not trying to force him. Got a borderline wide receiver 3. I think he does eventually become the top weapon on this offense once healthy, but the health itself is a concern, Ian, but it also limits his practice time. It limits his ability to get on the same page with Josh Allen. So even now, once in the game, like, can they give him a full package of plays, or are they going to have to, limit him? Does Josh Allen trust him, to keep running against man versus sitting down in a spot versus zone? All those sort of little timing things that are kind of critical to Amari Cooper's game. I think that those things could still continue to be off. So I just don't see a reason to force it. I'm not saying, to your point, he's not a stay away, but he's more of a boom bust low end wide receiver 3 for me.
Dwain and I have him in our top 36, but would start guys like Ladd McConkey, Brian Thomas, Khalil Shakur, Tank Dell, amongst others ahead of him. So we do have Cooper ahead of Jerry Jeudy, Jaylen Waddle, Romeo Doubs, DJ Moore. Again, it was a little bit intentional, but yeah, Amari Cooper, we'll see if he can get out there. Looking good now, though, for the time being. Last one, we do have Davante Adams, Jets wide receiver 1, 2, whatever you want to call him, with Garrett getting fed the football either way. Has not practiced yet, though, this week due to both wrist and an illness injury. So these are kind of the tricky ones, Dwain, when they're listed with both of the injuries. We're not exactly sure which one is more, because if it's the illness, we really wouldn't be concerned. But if it is more so the wrist, that's where it's like, oh man, he might actually have a chance of missing this game.
Yeah, we'll have to keep an eye on this one. To your point, he's been getting peppered with targets. So I still have him as a high-end wide receiver 2, low-end wide receiver 1 right now, but we'll be monitoring this one. So I might bump him down a couple of spots below some of these healthier options, but it's still really hard to move him down too low due to the matchup and how well he's been doing as a target earner.
We love attacking this Colts defense, and that's the matchup the Jets have right now. Dwain's wide receiver, let's see, 15, my wide receiver 13 on the week. So as long as Davante is good to go, and again, I tend to think he will be, get him in those fantasy lineups. So those were the key wide receiver injuries. Do have a handful of other ones I want to run through, though, before we get to tight ends, starting with guys who should be good to go. Michael Pittman practicing in full all week. Sorry, AD Mitchell, probably not going to get as many routes as you should, but with Anthony Richardson under center, again, tough to really like any of these Colts wide receivers anyway. Juju Smith-Schuster should be returning. Dwain, do you think Juju's return is going to overly impact DeAndre Hopkins' starting role?
I don't think so, but we have seen DeAndre Hopkins not be able to really get past like that 70% route participation mark, and I could see Juju making sure that doesn't happen. He could just be the other guy they rotate in to take some of those snaps for Hopkins, trying to keep him fresh. So I think it impacts him, but really in a way that we've already seen Hopkins impacted. So it potentially just keeps him from reaching that ceiling. Because if we had a 90% route participation rate from DeAndre Hopkins, man, we'd have him as a wide receiver 1. But he's stuck down in that 65 to 70% range right now.
it's close enough versus guys like, JSN and then, your Jaden Reed, Cortland Suttons of the world where it could happen. Probably will be going with those other guys. Also, we'll say Broncos getting back wide receiver Josh Reynolds, seemingly from IR. He has not played since week 5. Not interested in him, but again, going to be another cog that's going to make it tough for anyone other than Cortland Sutton to really get a full-time role. Guys who are limited, Tyreek Hill, this was the case last week with the wrist injury. He is expecting to keep on playing through it. Also have Odell Beckham Jr. popping up with a full practice, but a knee injury. So maybe more Malik Washington if he fails to suit up. Jaguars wide receiver Brian Thomas Jr. still limited with that chest injury, as is Gabe Davis with his shoulder. Again, though, that was the case last week, and both wound up playing in their usual roles, just not as well as they might if they were fully healthy. Not good here, though. 49ers wide receiver Juwan Jennings, late week addition on Thursday with an ankle issue. He was limited. 49ers always a bit wonky, as we all know with the CMC stuff with their injury reporting. So keep an eye on this one. But yeah, San Fran against the Seahawks in that late afternoon time slot. If you are relying on Juwan Jennings, just make sure you have a backup if he is going to be entering this weekend as questionable. Also, Cedric Wilson, limited for the Saints. Van Jefferson for the Steelers. We don't really care. And Tyquan Thornton, a personal DMP addition on Thursday. For you people that, let's just move on. Tight ends, Dwain, 2 featured injuries we want to get through. Starting off with Bills tight end 1, Dalton Kincaid, back-to-back DMPs to start the week. Had that knee injury that knocked him out basically before halftime of the Bills' win over the Colts in week 10. So if we don't see Kincaid, obviously extra few targets for Khalil Shakur, Amari Cooper if he's going to play, maybe even Mac Hollins, but probably we'll see almost a near full-time role for Dawson Knox, someone who, isn't going to stretch down the seam and have these potential explosive plays in the similar manner as Dalton Kincaid. But what do you have that 1 year, man? 8 or 9 touchdowns. Dawson Knox, Skank League streamer. Can we get it on it, Dwayne?
Yeah, I think you could. Honestly, he has the same target earning profile as, Tucker Kraft. Not very good. 14, 15% targets per route run, but plays in an offense with a good quarterback, high upside because they've been throwing the ball more. So yeah, you could see Dawson Knox come through with, 50 yards and potentially 2 touchdowns. He is a guy that he has shown chemistry in the past in the red zone with Mr. Josh Allen. So yeah, I would say one of those high-end tight end 2 kind of guys. We're going to have a tier of them this week of 4 or 5 guys that could make it into the tight end 1 conversation. They just need to score a touchdown.
Caught 15 of them between the 2021 and 2022 season. So again, would be very surprised if he's going for 80 or 90 receiving yards, but 50 and a touchdown, man, there are worse values out there. Also, Lions tight end Sam LaPorta dealing with a shoulder injury, back-to-back DMPs, presumably puts him on more of the, likely outside of things here. So don't think we're getting too excited about Brock Wright or even Shane Zylstra, but what this would do, Dwayne, is take away one key part of the passing game and accordingly funnel that many more targets to guys like Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jameson Williams.
Yeah, and Sun God's my wide receiver 1 for the week already due to this great matchup that we have. It really does stink for Sam LaPorta, who looked like he might finally be having that breakout performance. You get this matchup against the Jaguars this weekend. There was a lot to like here, but now not practicing, probably not going to play, so that stinks for him. But to your point, it is an upgrade for Amon-Ra St. Brown as well as Mr. Jameson Williams. And also a slight bump for the running backs who get targeted. It's not all gone to Gibbs like we thought it might, but both of these guys do get targeted out of the backfield, so they would get a slight bump as well as far as what we would expect in the passing game.
Good shout there. Again, 2 touchdown home favorites against the Jaguars. League worst defense and EPA allowed per dropback. I have, maybe some more words on Jameson Williams here in just a little bit. Other tight end news, Isaiah Likely back to a full practice and accordingly seemingly back into the lineup. Not that we're overly trusting him, but it is tough to get behind Mark Andrews as that top 5, top 6 option he might otherwise be if Likely was again going to miss some action. Also, Hunter Henry, Hayden Hurst, Michael Mayer, and Harrison Bryant, guys who have been improving in their practice participation throughout the week and accordingly expecting to suit up. Keep an eye on George Kittle. He did have that hamstring injury, started the week off with a DMP. However, got back to a limited practice on Thursday, and this has been, a kind of an occurrence throughout the year. He's had the hamstring issue. They've managed his practice reps. He's gone on to play and do George Kittle things on Sunday, so really not worried about the George Kittle issue. Also, Josh Oliver for the Vikings, who has actually been taking a low-key high number of targets away from Hawkinson, limited with wrist/hand injuries. So guys not practicing and accordingly definitely not looking good. Jake Ferguson on Thursday, although it is just an illness, so if he does get, a full session in on Friday or Saturday, would expect him to be good to go for Monday night. And Noah Brown, once again, not Noah Fant, for the Seahawks, not looking good with that groin injury, back-to-back DNPs to start the week. Could be another full-time role for rookie A.J. Barner. So that really is most of the injury news, guys. If you're into kickers, the Chiefs lost Harrison Butker to IR. Let Eric Reed cook. It's probably going to be something named Spencer Schrader. Also, the Jets have 4 key offensive linemen banged up, headlined by Tyron Smith with a neck injury. That's not good. Rams have 2 offensive linemen not practicing, just more injuries for them to deal with. Nick Bosa has been practicing with a hip issue, obviously one of the key defenders to look out for. And otherwise, again, relatively light week. Famous last words, I am knocking on wood. Not loud enough to piss my dogs off, though. So that was the injury breakdown, Dwayne. Now time to get into some bold predictions, and not to pat ourselves on the back too hard, but we are officially 21, 15, and 4 through our kind of wonky judging throughout this season on it. Last week, you had Tyron Tracy and Dalton Kincaid going off. Tracy finished with over 100 yards and a touchdown. Kincaid, only 24 yards, but Josh Allen did miss him on a potential 28-yard score. And more importantly, Kincaid only got to play about a quarter and a half before he was unfortunately sidelined with that injury we just talked about. Meanwhile, your boy had TJ Hawkinson and Taysom Hill putting together big games. Hawkinson went on to finish as the tight end 5 on the week. Taysom Hill, 50 yards on 6 touches. He did have an 88-yard touchdown catch nullified on a hold that, created the touchdown in the first place. So the fact I'm bringing it up is just me trying to cope a little bit. But again, you could see the process. The man told his family as they packed their final belongings into the car and drove off. So new week, new us, Dwayne. Let's kick things off with your first bold call. Someone who, if he plays again, set up awfully well.
Yeah, I nearly took him out just because we've got this risk/illness with Davante Adams, but I'm with you. I tend to think that he's playing and he's going to be fine. We'll have to monitor it today, but man, this is a guy that all the underlying data, Ian, is screaming that he's due for a huge game, but we haven't necessarily gotten it. Since he's been with the Jets, he's been the wide receiver 42, 38. We did get the wide receiver 7 performance in week 9 with 22 fantasy points, but then wide receiver 32. So he's been a bit of a roller coaster and more of the bad variety. We haven't, we haven't gotten the highs that we would hope from Adams, but the underlying data tells us otherwise. A 31% target share over that 4-game stretch. That's better than even Garrett Wilson. 35% of the air yards. That's right behind Garrett Wilson. And man, talking about a guy, end zone targets, 40% of the end zone targets over that period have gone to Adams. So almost half. So Rodgers continuing to look his way, and they're starting to get a little more chemistry, Ian. So 57% catchable target rate over those first 2 games. The last 2 games, 73% and 62%. So working out some of the kinks. Again, we'll have to keep an eye on the injuries, but yeah, I'm going to say 105 yards, 2 touchdowns on 8 catches for Davante Adams. If for some reason, guys, he does not suit up, my alternate would be Ladd McConkey in this potential shootout for the Chargers against the Cincinnati Bengals. McConkey leading his team in target share at 23%. They didn't have to pass the ball last week, right? He was still out there doing his thing, but they were mostly just running the ball. They got into a situation where they didn't have to throw in the second half of that game. So I think this is a game where we could see more of a shootout. So Ladd McConkey, and I'm doing it on the spot, but we'll say he's a slot guy. I'm not going to give him 100 yards, but let's go 90 yards and 2 touchdowns, Ian. 90. I'm giving him 2 touchdowns, but let's go 90 yards.
Harsh but fair, Mr. McFarland. I'm going with a running back. And yes, he's a big name, but I'm calling for an especially big game accordingly. Jonathan Taylor, not 100, but 200 total yards and a pair of trips to the end zone against the Jets defense that, to put it nicely, has just been really bad against the run. And to put it not so nicely, seems like they might be on the verge of overly quitting on this season. So some of those rushing lanes, man, we just saw guys like Joe Mixon and company have over the last couple of weeks. Scary to think about what someone like JT with true top end speed could potentially make with that. So again, I know I am picking, a bit of a star here. So we'll say if I don't get at least a top 3 overall finish, we'll chalk this one up as an L. But Jonathan Taylor, again, guys, if you want to go ahead and get in that anytime, multiple touchdown market, 100+ yards, ladder bets, you name it. Do you think this could be a great week for Mr. JT? Dwayne, Nick Chubb season perhaps in Cleveland. Explain yourself.
Yeah, so I mean, Chubb, he's been getting the workload, right? We just haven't had the matchups. We haven't had the yardage. We haven't had the touchdowns. All the things that matter, all the things that really give you the fantasy points, we haven't had from Chubb yet. But the underlying volume has been there. We know that that's the leading indicator for future solid fantasy performances. And this week you get a matchup where it's a close game. They're 2-point dogs versus the Saints. The Saints are giving up the 5th most rushing yards per game on the slate, so they've been very beatable in that fashion. I think you get the Browns coming out of a bye week, Ian, getting a little bit healthier. I think you got another week of time to decide, maybe we don't want Jameis Winston throwing the ball like 70% of the time. Do we get that down to like 60% of the time, at least as long as you're keeping the game close? I think that opens the door for a little bit more work for Chubb. But man, he's got 67% of the rushing attempts since he's come back over the last 2 games, 70 and 75%. So I'm going to say Nick Chubb gets 20 carries, 80 yards, not going crazy with the efficiency, but better than what it's been. That's 4 yards per carry, but punches in 2 scores for the Browns this weekend.
Love that call. Also had Nick Chubb in my manifesto article as a bold call, so we are on the same wavelength there, my friend. I'm going to close things out with Lions wide receiver 2, Jameson Williams, going off 115 yards and a touchdown. Still had his full-time role last week, just honestly had a bunch of air yards as well. But when your quarterback throws not 1, not 2, but 5 interceptions out there, tough to have too big of a game. So now gets, again, arguably the best matchup on the slate against Jacksonville at home. Maybe Sam LaPorta is out. Everything is setting up for Jameson Williams, who again has been a bit of a boomer bust wide receiver 3, but listen to the former part of that phrase. I do think the boom is coming here. So again, 115 yards and a touchdown for JMO. Hopefully a great day to be a Detroit Lions fantasy player. So Dwayne, that is going to close things out from us. Best of luck to everyone here in week 11. Just a few more weeks before we get into the fantasy playoffs. So no better time to hopefully go get a victory for that squad. So for Dwayne, for producer Kelsey, for producer Matt, I'm Ian. Thanks again for tuning into the Fantasy Life Show. And until next time, take care, everybody.